So already, I don't know how you are, but I feel full from the conference. If you've been to events here and there, and beautiful things, but a lot. And here we are in this group, but also in rather uncertain times. And whatever your politics, because it is a divided and volatile time, we're all somehow held in this matrix. We're connected in it. And so I want to ask, how many of you, I did it at the village stage, how many of you have felt worry, alarm, concern, not sleeping, whatever, with the sea change in politics? Look around, okay? So you can take a breath and say, it's not just you. You know that, right? How many of you have become, whatever your politics, whatever side you feel to stand up for, have become active in some way more than you had before? Half the room anyway. Thank you. I bow to you. Hallelujah. So the first thing I think that's necessary is just to take a breath and to stop and put down your device, which you've done here for a moment. Albert Einstein said, at least I read it in Scientific American, he said, if you can drive safely while kissing a girl, you're simply not giving the kiss the attention it deserves, all right? And there's something happening in our time that's not just all the stuff that's coming from the screen, but it's really touching the soul and the heart of people, and it's asking something deep of us. Now, in the Greek mythology, the Furies are unleashed on earth. They come out of the earth. When oaths aren't kept, when commitments and rules are broken, when there are offenses against the vulnerable or against the populace. And the Furies, one is named Vengeance. You may have noticed her, or him, I don't know. Maybe they're trans, I'm not sure. We're in San Francisco, right? One is named Jealousy, and one is named Hatred. And those all have been activated, and the thing that's wild about it is that the Furies can't be stopped when they're released because of the broken promises and oath and so forth, except when Athena, who was the goddess of wisdom, and if you go to Athens, the great temple there is the temple to the goddess Athena. When Athena herself welcomed the Furies into her temple and gave them a place of honor. Otherwise, the Furies will continue. So there's something in this story for us at this time that we have to welcome all those energies which we feel in ourselves, people raise their hand, and which we feel in the field. And we know in a kind of deep way that no amount of technology and nanotechnology and biotechnology and computers is going to stop continuing warfare and racism and environmental destruction and tribalism, that those come out of the consciousness of humanity, and we're going to have to develop a capacity to be connected and present with one another, whatever your political point of view is, in such a way that we match the outer amazing developments with the development of the human heart. It's necessary at this time. Now, when you really look at having some sense of respect, of bringing the Furies into the temple and so forth, it also means that you have to understand that includes the coal miners, and the nurses and the software engineers and the people who lost their jobs and the people who just found jobs, all of them, or can't find a job for their family. And you realize that what people are looking for actually is meaning, is some sense of dignity, whatever their life is. And here's the possibility that there was a man, a great leader in the Northwest provinces, which was Pakistan and Afghanistan under the British colonial time, named Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, a close compatriot of Gandhi, and he formed the largest peace army ever known on the earth, 100,000 Muslim fighters who all vowed to resist the British colonial rule with their bodies and their life without violence. And he drew upon the dignity that they had as human beings, and they were tested and killed in order to bring about the freedom for their people. But more than that, he ennobled them at the same time. And this nobility is in all of us. So it resonates. You can hear the worst stuff online or whatever, and then you hear Martin Luther King, after his church was bombed and the children were killed, "We will match your capacity to inflict suffering with our capacity to endure suffering. We will meet your physical force with soul force. We will not hate you, but we cannot in all good conscience obey your unjust laws, and we will soon wear you down by our capacity to suffer and to love you anyway." And there's something, you hear it and it touches the soul, and you say, this is what's possible for us as human beings. Then we have politics. Politics is basically ritualized warfare. It is, instead of the Democrats or Republicans or Libertarians taking their tanks and guns and just saying, okay, I'm in charge now, it's done in a kind of ritualized way, but it's a kind of a battle. And the whole aim of politics, says H.L. Mencken, ancient and great commentator of the last century, is to keep the populace in a state of alarm and fearful so that they will vote for safety. That's how the thing is done. And they kind of hijack your limbic system and say, okay, fight, flight, or freeze, you're on now. The primitive brain gets hijacked. And all those people who raise their hands, you can feel it in your body. You can feel it in your nervous system. And when it's hijacked and that fight, flight, or freeze comes, you can't see clearly, you can't think straightly. Straightly, whatever it is. It's a word. And if you looked at what happened in Yugoslavia, which became the war of Bosnia and Serbia and Croatia, the radio was used hate speech. Those people did it to our people hundreds of years ago. We can't trust them. We have to get them back. Or in Rwanda, between the sides, or in Northern Ireland, and so forth. We have to stop the war. And the place that the battle stops is in ourselves every day. Turn off the news, mostly. Get enough news, but you don't need a lot of it. You know the plot. There's not a lot of surprise in it. There really isn't. Hike, swim, Step outside, see the vastness of the sky and the mystery of life. There's a much bigger scene going on here than what you think. Look at the trees and feel their resilience and their rootedness, and take that equanimity and balance into your body. And let yourself become the temple of wisdom that you would want for the world. As Thich Nhat Hanh says, when the crowded Vietnam refugee boats met with storms or pirates, if everyone panicked, all would be lost. But if even one person on the boat remained centered and calm, it was enough. It showed the way for all of them to survive. So who is that person? And this is really the question. The question isn't the future of politics or even the future of humanity. It's the presence of eternity. Can you stop and tune into something that connects with your soul and your heart that's so much bigger? It's why Gandhi stopped, one day a week he would take in silence, bringing down the entire British Empire, hundreds of thousands of people marching in the streets. Gandhiji, we need you. I'm sorry, it's Thursday. It's my day off. I have to sit, quiet myself, and listen to what is the deepest, and as you just heard, what's the truest thing and what do I most value and care about? And then not stand up for it in a heroic way, but because you love it, in a dedicated way, because this is what matters to you. And when you listen deeply, the universal values are really clear. Hatred never ends by hatred, but by love alone is healed. This is the ancient and eternal law. Individual or a society that's based on greed and hatred and ignorance, those forces create suffering. As individual or social society that's based on love and generosity and respect and wisdom, compassion, that brings happiness to all who are part of it. A society that offers dignity and honors all members, takes care of those who are vulnerable, such a society will prosper and not decline. This is the kind of ancient and eternal laws. And so what to do? You have to turn toward the difficulties, not get immersed and not get re-traumatized, but look at them clearly. The person who, being really on the way, says Zen Master Karlfried Durkheim, and falls upon hard times, will not as a consequence turn to those who offer refuge and comfort and encourage their old self to survive, just as you heard in the story just before, but rather they'll seek out someone who will faithfully and inexorably help them to risk themselves so that they may endure the difficulty and pass courageously through it. Only to the extent that a person exposes themselves over and over again to annihilation can that which is indestructible be found in them, and in this daring lies true dignity and the spirit of awakening. So you turn toward the difficulty from a quiet place, and you see that the election or whatever is really a symptom, like in family therapy, these identified patient, but it's really a symptom of the family. And you begin to name the suffering that you see that's shared. It's not one side or the other. It's a shared suffering, And we have this myth of American exceptionalism, but as was spoken earlier on the stage, the lines from Langston Hughes, let America be America again, the America she never was. Because we haven't yet, we're still fighting the Civil War, honestly. And we haven't yet come to terms with Native American genocide and with slavery in the kind of truth and reconciliation way that happened in South Africa, where we were honest about both the suffering that's been caused and then come together in an honorable way and hold it with compassion. And my dear friend Ram Dass, who I visit in Hawaii sometimes and teach with, he has a great big altar with, Buddha and Kuan Yin and Mary and Jesus and, pages from the holy Zohar and, all kinds of things and pictures of Mother Teresa and Gandhi and saints. And right in the middle, before it used to be Dick Cheney, he was replaced by John Boehner, and now big picture of Donald Trump in the middle on his altar among all the deities. And he said, this is my practice, to become the loving awareness that the world needs and to hold it all. Doesn't mean that you accept, whatever your political point of view, the policies that you feel are destructive. But can you hold this all with a kind of deep wisdom? And then you start to trust. As Gandhi says, those who think spirituality has nothing to do with politics don't know what spirituality really means. Trust that what you find in yourself is also what the world needs. And so in Zen they say there are only two things. You sit and you sweep the garden. And it doesn't matter how big the garden is. You quiet the mind, you tend the heart, and then you get up to the garden of the world. And you stand up and you respond, whatever the deep values that there are in you. But you also do it in a way that is not out of rage, not out of anger. Here's Molly Ivins. She writes, so keep fighting for freedom and justice, beloveds, but don't forget to have fun doing it. Be outrageous, rejoice in all the oddities freedom can produce, and when you get through celebrating the sheer joy of a good fight, be sure to tell those who follow how much fun it was. And there's something about it. I was in the airport with my daughter, who's an asylum and immigration lawyer, and there were more lawyers than there were people being detained, but they were all offering their services. And, 1,500, 2,000 people. The best part, groups of 300, 500 chanting, no ban, no fear, refugees are welcome here, had a New Orleans jazz band in the middle. And so they'd start, no ban, no fear, and the drummer would kick in. And then following that, the sax player would do a riff and the trumpet and trombone. And pretty soon it was like music. The cops were all smiling and laughing. It was protest, but it was artistry. It was somehow to touch people as well. Now, what this means is that you have to open your heart and be willing to hold the sorrows, not just of you, but of everybody. Because everybody who voted and everybody who didn't vote carry their measure of tears. And James Baldwin writes, I believe one of the reasons that people cling to their hate and prejudice so stubbornly is they sense that once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with their own pain. And so to stand up honorably doesn't mean to blame, but it's to see that we have a shared pain in this country, and a shared suffering, and also a shared magnificence and beauty, and not to turn your gaze away from either one. And then, when you do, again, and not in a heroic way, but out of your dedication, well, here, Barbara Widener founded Grandmothers for Peace, describes it this way. I began to question, what kind of a world am I leaving for my grandchildren? So I got a sign, a Grandmother for Peace, stood on a street corner. Then I joined others kneeling as a human barrier at a munitions factory. I was taken to prison, strip searched, thrown into a cell. Something happened to me. I was free. I realized they couldn't do anything more to me. And now Barbara and her organization, Grandmothers for Peace, work in dozens of countries around the world. It may not be your way, but you have your way. And as Thomas Jefferson said, one person with courage is a majority. That's you. It also, Lewis Mumford counseled as well, a person of courage never needs weapons, but they may need bail. So whatever your practice, whatever your inner training, and many of you have inner practices, now is the time to use it, to quiet yourself, to steady your heart, to listen to what are your deepest values, whatever they are, and then you know this, to join with others, to plant seeds, because as Thoreau said, if you plant a good seed, I don't care where you plant it, it will eventually bear fruit. To become an ally for those who need it, to protect what matters to you, whether it's the environment or Black Lives Matter or justice or refugees or the vulnerable or those who need retraining in their jobs and those who need support who feel left out. All of these things. And to trust somehow, as Pablo Neruda, the great poet, says, you can pick all the flowers, but you can't stop the spring. That there's some inviolable spirit in humanity. There's a basic goodness in us that can be touched when we quiet. It's not the lowest common denominator. It's the beauty in the human heart that was born into you. And so I want to do one more thing as we finish up, and that is ask you to do a little reflection. If you were to set in yourself an intention today, a kind of sacred intention, one more step of bringing your particular gift to this country or to this world or to your bioregion or to your community at this time, what would it be? Because there's a thing in Buddhist tradition where you take a kind of vow to do something, and setting the intention is the important step. And I'll give you a little poetic example, and then we'll close our eyes for a couple of minutes. This from poet Diane Ackerman, a dear friend. She writes, in the name of daybreak, and the eyelids of morning, and the wayfaring moon, and the night when it departs, I swear I will not dishonor myself with hatred, but offer myself humbly as a guardian of nature, a healer of misery, a messenger of wonder, and an architect of peace. Now, it might be as simple as to say, I will bring kindness to whatever I touch. But let your eyes close for a moment, just as we get ready to end. And begin to reflect, if you have within you a particular gift or capacity or response that you can bring to plant as a seed, to offer in whatever way it might be at this time that so longs for it, and you were to take one more step and really make it come alive more fully, what would that be? And what would your intention be behind it? This is having a conversation with your heart. And you can know. You can listen. Now, if we had a little more time, I think we do. It says 6 minutes. I might ask you to do something difficult. When we leave here, I'll ask you to write it down, because then you'll really remember it. But I might ask you to turn to the person next to you and tell them out loud what came to you and listen to what came to them. And not as a conversation, but really as a kind of deep and caring listening. This is something that's spoken from the heart or the soul. Why don't you do it? Just take a minute or two. Turn to somebody near you. Tell them what came. And if you need to, you can make 3, but you only have a couple minutes. So finish up. How was that, to take the time to listen and to listen to another? What'd you feel? People are nodding. I think that means that it was worthwhile. It's actually beautiful. It's like, okay, this is something that's in me I can give voice to, I can hear from another. And we talk about connecting and the true interconnection. It's this connection of heart. Gary Snyder, the great Pulitzer Prize-winning poet and environmentalist, Earth Household, and so forth for half a century, was interviewed by my friend, colleague Wes Nisker recently. Gary's in his mid-80s. And Wes said, Gary, you know, you've been an environmentalist. The oceans are rising, climate disruption, global warming, the loss of species, so many environmental problems. What advice do you have for us now? And Gary looked back and he said, don't feel guilty. He said, if you're going to save it, don't save it out of guilt or anger or all those emotions. Those are the things that are making the problem. Save it because you love it. That's really the only force and the only power. It's what mothers lifting cars off their children. It is the force that the planet needs. And it takes courage. It takes courage to bear witness to your own sorrows and the suffering around, and to say you have seeds and you have a piece to contribute. And you have a gift. Every single one has a gift. And so a local school teacher here in the Tenderloin, in the kind of place in San Francisco where there's a lot of homeless people, liked to make sandwiches to feed the homeless people in her neighborhood. When she got home from school, if she wasn't tired, she'd make a bunch of sandwiches and go down and distribute them. And she didn't do it because she wanted to be thanked. Sometimes people refused, not for the gratitude. It was simple. They were hungry. She had food. She fed them. After a time, the local media found out about her work, and she became a kind of minor celebrity in her area. Fellow teachers and friends began to send her money for her ministry. To their surprise, they all got their money back with a short note that read, "Make your own damn sandwiches." I put it in your good hands and your good hearts. You know what to do. You each have listened. You need to take the time, like Gandhi, to quiet yourself, to walk in nature, to listen to music, to get inspired by what is the deepest gift that you have, and then bring it out into the world. Thank you.